Hello and welcome back to Roaming with Restless Women. Today I have a person of my own heart. She is also a digital nomad. I'll let her tell you what that means. But I have Kristy Halvorsen today. Kristy's a nomadic world traveler, mentor, coach, published author, and a speaker. For 7 years, she's lived full time in her Airstream, which is usually located off grid, deep in nature. I'll let you tell her what off grid is, Kristy. In 2017, she sold her house and her belongings and set out to wander purely by instinct. Work and fun now intermingle through conversations and connections. A common thread is helping people find the simplicity to live their dreams and realize success in their own special way without sacrificing happiness along the way. Her word to describe this simple, fun, and beautiful way to live is to Coddiwomple. To live in curiosity and wonder, embrace the unknown, and trust life while waking up to the simplicity and freedom available to all of us. Welcome, Kristy. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
This is going to be great. So, first of all, what is off grid?
Well, off grid just means what the words say. It's living without being connected to power or um, water. So I found it took about a year to realize it in my journey, but I realized I like living way out in nature, and to do that, I got decked out with solar panels. I have a special setups in my trailers so I can serve water. And so I can go out in the forest on my own and stay about 3 weeks before needing anything. And the one thing that's
That's
limiting me
cool.
is water. So I'll have to fill up
Yeah.
my tank of water after 2.5, 3 weeks.
Wow, that's amazing that you can stay out that long, especially with without water. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We have a big 42 foot and not enough solar to run anything really. We had a generator that we used when we went out west, but now it's in storage. So that's one of my goals is to go off grid more
Yeah.
and not waste the resources. But water is a definite issue because my husband loves long shower. So tell me, when did you become interested in being a nomad? Where did you hear about this lifestyle, or what made you interested in it?
Well, it was just kind of a dream. I've had 3 careers, and the bulk middle of it from 24 to 38 was as a firefighter paramedic. And you get to retire very
Wow,
young as a firefighter paramedic. So I'd planned between 50 and 52 to travel, and I wanted to, travel in Airstream and, live the retired life. And so that just was a dream. It wasn't like I followed anybody on YouTube. I just thought it'd be
uh-huh.
amazing to see, North America. And
Yeah.
then I got sick and had some things come up at the firehouse. And I had an exposure to some chemicals and some other physical things that came up. And I realized, I don't know if I'll be around and how healthy I'll be at 50, 52. And my whole mindset switched to, why don't I just do this now? And then I had my own business, but it was more, for fun kind of thing. So
Uh-huh.
I just ramped up my business and then got to the point where I was able to just transition over. And that happened in November of 17, and I've been rolling ever since.
And so, what was that side hustle business that you had?
It was coaching.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was drawn. Thing is, Coddiwompling, because you'll probably ask about that. So
Yes.
Coddiwompling is just listening to the tickles of your soul. And some call it your heart, your gut, your inner knowing, your intuition. And so I've done that most of my whole life. And for some reason I didn't even know what coaching was, but I was just drawn to it. So in 2014, I went and found a proper school and got certified, and then, did that for a few years. And so that's what I'm saying. I was certified, and yet it wasn't my income. It was something I was doing for fun. But then
Yeah,
everything happens for a reason. That's part of the Coddiwomple. So
absolutely.
when the idea came up, it was summer of 15 when I was like, wait a minute. It was just everything was laid out, and I said, "Oh my gosh." And I thought it would take 5 years. It ended up taking less than 3. But yeah, I just ramped things up and bought the Airstream and the truck and started getting ready and then set off.
I love Airstreams. So, So the trigger event basically was the health issues.
Hmm.
Kind of got you for sure on the road, but earlier than you had planned.
Much earlier. I
Yeah.
mean, and the thing was, is I also, when I got promoted to lieutenant, so a station officer in the fire department,
Hmm.
I was the first woman to be promoted, and it was, a young, growing, rural department, fairly rural, not totally rural, but it just, uh, the guys weren't ready yet, and I had a lot of pushback, and
Mm,
there was even a bit that you could have called harassment, and I just wasn't. It went from a job I loved to something that was getting harder and harder to do. And that was another part. So I still loved it, but I was wondering if I wanted to do this forever. And then when I got sick, it was like the universe is like, "All right, honey, we got other plans." And you didn't
yeah.
take the first bait, but how about this one? And it was just, and when that happened, then I was like, "Okay, I see the writing on the wall." But what was really nice is I had a really good coach that said, "Wouldn't it be awesome to fall back in love with the job you have before you set off?" And I was like, "That's going to be impossible." But I
Yeah.
did. So by the time I left, I'd fallen back in love with my job and everyone I worked with. And it was tough to leave, but I just knew, again, my inner knowing said it's time to go. So yeah, that's how that story went.
That's terrific. So one thing that I think a lot of times gets in our own way is fear,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, Particularly like what stopped me earlier on of doing this. The first time I got laid off in 55, when I was 55, not in 55, good Lord. No,
Yeah.
was the fear because I had, my husband and my kids, and I was the main breadwinner, and it was mostly financial fear, not fear of, pursuing the lifestyle. So, what would you say if you had any fears? What were they, and how did you get over those?
Well,
And if you didn't have fears, yes, okay to say too.
well, man, we could talk about this for a while. I actually have
Uh-huh.
one of my most popular blogs is the story about my fear.
Yeah.
And what happened was there was two of us that were planning this. It was my prior boyfriend, and we split up in
Mhm.
August of 17 in a dramatic fashion that I didn't see it coming, and I probably should have.
Yeah.
But in August of 17, there was no more we. And for about a
Mm.
month, I was sadder than I'd ever been sad in my life. And I loved him. And but the sadness didn't make sense. I was like, this is really worse than anything I've, and my mom called me out on it. And she
Oh,
said,
wow.
you're sad because you feel like you've lost your love and your best friend. But really what's going on is you think he stole your dream. You think you can't do this on your own.
Oh,
And just saying that now I'm getting goosebumps because I didn't know. Sometimes we don't know our own fears.
right.
And until she said that, I was just it was a truth. Oh, I can't do this on my own. And until my mom said that, I didn't know that I was lying to myself. And when she said that, that was middle of September. And realized I wasn't he and I were planning to hit the road years later. He
Hmm.
just happened to have the Airstream and we're getting things ready, but still hadn't quit my job, hadn't done anything. When my mom said that in mid-September, and it really hit me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. Between mid-September and mid-November, I left my job, sold my house, got rid of all my stuff, prepared everything for full-time living, got the business ready for being on the road. And so 2 months time, I went from, oh, I'm going to do this with a partner and sometime in the next couple of years. In 2 months, I went from that to on the road. So
That's
that was what you're talking about. It was a fear that I didn't know was a fear.
right. Right. And sometimes it takes a coach or, a more objective family member or somebody to ask you the right question or make just the right observation.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden your eyes open and you realize I'm a lot more capable than I thought I was.
Exactly. Exactly.
And, part of it too, when I read your story, and that's the reason why I asked you about it. I read your story on your blog, um, your origin story, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that I thought about was when she said that, I thought you're also, though, grieving.
Yeah,
And it wasn't just grieving the loss of your partner, but also, or your boyfriend, but also grieving what you thought your life was going to be. And I think
exactly.
we all at some point get that same kind of grieving about what we thought our life was going to be and now what it is.
Right.
And if you can't get out of that and say, and set a new dream, you kind of
Hmm.
get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you brought this up because this is the essence of Coddiwompling. One of the definitions of I've defined it. I'm hoping, you know, it'll be like the word Google. 20 years ago, there was no word of Google,
Yeah.
and at some point, the Coddiwomple will be in the dictionaries and everybody will use it. But one of the definitions is to unpredict your future and to be open to all possibilities. Because we predict our future. We all do it without realizing it. And then we get really upset or sad or angry when things don't turn out. And so part of Coddiwompling is being so open and doing this best we can to not predict what's going to happen. Because what it looks like to me is when we do that, when we stop predicting the future, we are open to so much more. And things that we could never imagine on our own become possible. And that's a big part of living in this freedom. And by the
Mhm.
way, most people don't want to run around in the forest in an Airstream. So Coddiwompling isn't about that. We can
Right.
all Coddywomple in any part of life, no matter where we're at. We can Coddywomple from our couch, our office, our relationship. So I want to make sure everybody knows that Coddiwompling is not about traveling, though it does
Right.
apply, but it's all of life. And I love to ask the question, where do you most want to be free?
Oh,
And if
that's
we
a
all sit with
great.
that, we'll have some answers. Like everybody
Yeah.
listening could just sit with that and answers will pop up.
Uh-huh.
But most of us are blind to the real guts of that question because we don't even know where we're stuck. Just like I didn't know where I was stuck and my mom woke me up to it. So that's the trick is, yeah, either loving family members or friends or someone that you can explore with. Because that's the biggest thing I love to do with people is help them realize where they're not free and they don't even realize it.
Yep. Where you're stuck. It it's you're stuck and you don't know you're stuck
Yeah,
a lot of times. Or
yeah,
you think, okay, I chose this and this isn't turning out exactly how I wanted. And it's not fulfilling me, it's not making me free. It's so being open to um changing that without making yourself feel like a failure.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I eliminated should and must from my
Yeah,
vocabulary like a long time ago. I just don't even use
exactly.
those words because then that indicates to me I'm not free, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so what's the most important aspect about all of your careers
Hmm.
that has kind of been, Marcus Buckingham calls it your red thread. What is the value or the thing that you hold most dear that you can see in every single career and or life experience that you've had?
It to me, it's exactly what we're talking about. And it's it's trusting ourself. And I was
Hmm.
so fortunate because I learned this in my mid 20s, in my early 20s actually. Because I was getting a master's degree in engineering. I had a job that paid me probably too much money for a young kid in the early 2000s. I was making more money than either one of my parents would ever make.
Oh
And I
yeah.
couldn't stand my job. I didn't like sitting in a cubicle, and I was a mechanical engineer, structural analyst, and I would just sit and play with turbine engines all day in my computer, and it was boring as all get out. And
Yeah, it sounds boring.
every night I'd leave my really well-paid job. I was 23 and go volunteer and be a firefighter for free and love it. And then come back the
Oh,
next day and do work and watch the clock. And I just realized this is not what I want for my life. And there was nobody, and I mean nobody, the people at work, my professors at the university, my family, friends, everybody was like, are you crazy? You're going to leave this job and you're going to go be a firefighter and make less than half the salary? And you're going to, no, people don't do that. But I knew. And so I jumped ship and did it. And I always say that that was the best decision of my life. I mean, granted, I got a career that I enjoyed and loved for 14 years. It felt like going to summer camp. So that was wonderful. But the reason why it was the best decision of my life, because at 23 years old, I learned that I can follow what I know in my soul, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
the whole world says. And yeah, even in my brain, it didn't make sense. I'm like, this on paper is not very smart, right?
Yeah.
But my brain is like, you let go of what your brain's saying and you follow this knowing inside. And because it worked so well, and I was so happy, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did this. You know, at 23, 24 years old, I realized I can do this in all parts of my life. And it's helped me forever, not even in my career, but in living. And it's funny, one of my mentors who I met when I was a kid, after I'd been on the road 2 years, she calls me Bird. That's one of my nicknames when I was younger. And one day she's just like, Bird, you got to tell me how this happened. I mean, you've always been a little different. Like you just do things. People are like, what the heck is going on? But this one's a big one, you know, selling my house and moving into an Airstream. And I'm like, it's the same. It's the same. My heart knew to do it and I jumped. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
common thread. And yeah, it helped me in my careers because as a firefighter, you got to trust that you'll know how to help and fix what's happening because you get thrown anything and everything at you every day when people call 911. And then the
In the
same in
moment,
coaching. Yeah,
without the ability or um, the time to go look something up, or sometimes you
exactly.
just have to go with your gut
Yeah,
and trust that things will work
exactly.
out how they're supposed to. And that's the other thing, is letting go of, I have to know what the supposed to is.
Hmm.
I The result is going to be the result, whatever that result is. I have to let go of expecting myself to know what all those results should be. Again, should, um, because that's not in my control.
Hmm.
It's life, and
Yeah,
life is sometimes messy, and life throws situations at everybody that, depending on how you actually react to that situation, um, can be good, better, best, right? But how
hmm,
you react to that situation oftentimes determines um, what your next step should be as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks to me when we're living in the moment, just like as a firefighter. And what was cool in firefighting is it's not a one person thing. You've got a crew and you just kind of trust. Well, I don't know. Let's just, a lot of times I don't want to make it sound like the firefighters don't know what we're doing. We have a ton of training and we're
Oh
prepared.
yeah.
But there's times you show up on a scene, whether it's medical or a fire or a car accident, and you're just like, wow, this is something we didn't quite train for. But you just trust you jump into action and you trust you're going to figure it out. And
Yeah.
it's the same feeling in life. And it's the same feeling whether you're giving a speech or writing a book or in a relationship. It's trusting that in the moment, you'll know the next step and not much after. Because when we start planning the 10th and 12th step, that's when we get in trouble. You just take that one step at a time and trust you'll know what's next. And that's really where the gold is.
Exactly. And we're okay. So, for those of us out here who might be um, skeptical, or who might feel like, I'm not a risk taker, I need to have a plan. How have you coached individuals like that to be able to truly listen to their gut?
It's all direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what's neat, this is the one of the best parts, is we are all natural Coddywomplers. There is no one on the planet that has not Coddywompled because look at little children.
Mm.
We come out of the womb Coddiwompling the heck out of life. We are not stuck in emotions. We're not judging ourselves. That's why you can watch a little kid go from extremely happy to really upset to giggling and playing to wanting to snuggle to taking a nap in a span of half an hour.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
And
Watching
there's
my grandson. Yes, I can tell you that. And he's only
exactly,
2 weeks old, so
but we've all been there. We've all done that. We didn't live with shoulds back then. Little kids, even, as they grow older, not talking about infants, but, when they're old enough to go outside and play, they don't say, "Oh, I want to go build my interpersonal relationships and increase my hand-eye coordination." No, they just want to go out and play with their friends at the park. But guess what happens? All that happens, but they're just following. They're playing because of the sheer joy and the act of playing. And they're not expecting anything from it other than just to go play. And to
hmm
me, we're bringing ourselves to a space where we can let go of all the beliefs and conditioning and bias that we've been taught throughout all of life, letting the shoulds and all fall away, taking all of our adult knowing and wisdom and letting everything fall away and going back into that place of play like we were as kids in everything we do. And and it's funny because people think it's a risk, but whoever thought there's risk in play? And that's what we're talking about, is
hmm
bringing play back into our everyday life and letting go of all the stuff we've been taught.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's direct experience. To answer the question, because I didn't quite answer it, is I help and encourage people to have a direct experience of this and start
Mm.
small and and let that bloom. But this is not something you sit down and learn.
No.
This is actually a letting go. I joke with people that I'm a stripper, not the kind that dances on poles. Believe me, I wouldn't be good at that. Um, but I'm a stripper in that I help people let go of stuff that they don't even realize they're holding on to. And then from there, the invitation is to run some experiments and go out and do this in real life, in whatever part of life you want to do it in, or all of it. And the
hmm
more we experience the freedom and the joy and the all that comes from living like this, even if it's just in one part of life, the more it's going to creep out into all parts of life until we can be complete Coddywomplers and everything and go back to that way that we lived when we were a kid.
hmm Wow. Yeah, I think I'm in a place right now of stress with some things that are happening in my family. And um I think if you have that kind of grounding in Coddiwompling,
Mhm.
you can relieve a lot of stress that you have no of situations you have zero control over.
Mhm.
You can relieve a lot of that stress by maintaining that playful, that light. Things are going to work out however they're supposed to work out. Um, knowing, you know,
Exactly.
yeah. Wow. Okay. I love this. We could be on here for hours. Okay. Um, what is it about being deep in nature that for you personally um opens up more freedom for you?
Oh, that's a good question. To me, it's nature is our biggest, best teacher.
Mm,
And everything is nature. And yeah, some people aren't drawn to go live in the forest. That's fine because nature's everywhere. But to me, it's the it's the peace and quiet and learning and seeing how nature, be it the plants or the animals or people, live in a space without all these expectations and modern day constraints.
mhm.
And like if you look at an animal, this is one example. Like we can even take a pet because everybody's seen a pet. So you look at a dog. If a dog loses its leg, we've all seen the three-legged dog, right? We've even seen
Right.
two-legged dogs and dogs with the little wheelchair things that carried the rear end
Yeah.
around. But if a dog loses its leg, it's going to be in some pain. But it just cops around and figures out how to do it. It doesn't sit and woes me or like tries to figure out how this happened and why me. Animals don't do that. Nature doesn't do that. They
Right.
just they just like, oh, this is what's happening. All right. And to me, when we can do that for ourselves, like it changes everything. And so I could say it's the sunsets and the ocean and the rivers, which I just totally love and enjoy. Like it just makes my heart sing. And yet there's I think a big part of it is this space, is seeing how life's without the stories we make up. Because there's always just what happens. There's just what happened. The dog loses his leg. And then there's what a human would make of it. The dog doesn't make anything of
Right.
it, but we do. So so it's that, and man, just the feeling of awe, like
Mm,
at the biggest things, like a grand view, or just noticing a caterpillar walking across the trail, or a centipede, or a bird. It's just all that. To me,
yeah.
nature is my happy space.
It since we started on the road full time, obviously I've gotten to see things in beautiful parts of this country, and being out in nature feeds me as well. What I most enjoy about nature is its connectivity.
Yeah.
That I've always been drawn to seeing patterns and connections. In my English literature background, what is that but the study of people connecting and not connecting, and the consequences and the stories of what we all make up in our minds about things. But when you're out in nature, just and if you're paying attention, you see the connectivity,
Yeah.
and it's simple, it's life, it's death, it's it's just beautiful
Yeah.
because there are no expectations.
No.
And like you said, animals don't make things up about what things mean. That's one
Yeah.
of our greatest downfalls, I think.
Yeah.
What does our mind make something mean, even though it's may not even be that thing?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
love that you brought up connection. That is huge. I'm so glad you
Hmm.
brought that up because it is true. There's this symbiotic, like, I almost wonder if it's this beyond connection. It's the nature is, there's just one big thing called nature, and we're a part of it.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
like to call it connection, and yet it's just the it's the living of life, you know?
It's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like to me too, you've noticed the beauty, like when a tree falls over and then it kind of makes a snake, the trunk, because it needs to grow back up towards the sky.
Hmm.
Like there's so much beauty in things that a lot of if we got knocked over as a human, metaphorically, we would make up stuff about it. And actually, those hard times are create some of the most beautiful experiences and the most beautiful humans either ever. Just like the trees that get blown over in
Hmm.
a hurricane and somehow find a way to start growing again.
Oh, even I drove down the Highway 85, right after Helene hit,
Mhm.
literally that very last day of Helene. I
Yeah.
was driving from Atlanta to Charlotte, and all the sides of the road, the trees had fallen either into the highway and had been, cut off, or they had fallen over the other way. But I just was noticing how beautiful they looked, all leaning over at the same angles at
Yeah.
different points. The symmetry was just beautiful. It was random, and it was beautiful at the
Yeah.
same time. I didn't, by the way, at that point in the day, I did not know about what happened in the North Carolina mountains. So,
Right.
you know, that wasn't necessarily beautiful, but it was it was what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I ask three questions at the end of every episode. And the first one is, if you could close your eyes just for a moment and describe the picture that appears in your mind when I say wise woman, and then open your eyes and describe her.
She's free flowing. She's not fighting against herself or her life. She just lives, and in that living leads by example.
Mhm.
And she listens, but with much more than just her ears. And she's comfortable in her own skin. She loves and lives and invites all those around her, like everyone, towards like their highest expression of themselves. And yeah, she's free and yeah.
I love that. Free flowing. You're the first person to say that in all these
Mhm.
episodes. So I appreciate that very much because I do believe when you're free flowing and allowing um, things to just be as they are, it takes so much stress off.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's what we can help today's generation with, I think, for sure. So this is probably a dumb question for you, but where do you like to roam?
Ah, anywhere and everywhere,
There we
like
go.
physically to new places, and yet you can't ever step in the same river twice. So every place is a new place. But also, I love to roam in cultures and I love to roam in food and
Oh, I love that.
traditions and then even conversations. Like I'll talk to anybody. I want to roam in conversation. So I think I love to roam anywhere and everywhere doing anything.
Oh, yay. Me too. Me too. And what makes you restless in a good way?
Oh, rest this in a good way.
Mhm.
So the first thing that popped to mind is like the constraints of modern culture. They really get me restless in a good way. Even the
Mhm.
self-improvement thing, it's like, oh my goodness, there's so much more than that. We are so much more. Like, who's the self we're improving? And then, and then just the purity of like, I feel like what makes me restless on more than anything is wondering, the awe, and then yeah, anything that feels like an invitation to just bloom. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, Kristy, thank you so much for appearing. I'm going to definitely invite you back maybe in a few months or a year because I want to keep in touch with your continued Coddiwompling and growth. And so tell us about what's coming up in March for you
Oh, so in March, me and
of
a friend are
2025, by the way.
yes, March 2025, I'm
Mhm.
offering up a program that's called Create a Vocation You Don't Need a Vacation From. And it is going to be so much fun. And it doesn't matter if you're a business owner or if you work for someone else. It's all about really loving what you do and being your highest expression and being rewarded for it. But it's a 9 we were gonna meet 9 times over about 3 months, and yeah, it's gonna be freaking amazing. And so
Oh, it
what's
sounds
fun is you've
great.
got me, who's, a solopreneur, and you've got Marlene, who's joining me in this, who works a job that, she has a boss at. And so you get 2 people guiding you through that have 2 different ways of doing this.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just gonna be a beautiful opening for all of us.
Oh, it sounds amazing. So, folks, if you're interested in diving deep into learning more about yourself, and learning more about what your vocation could be, definitely sign up for the program. We're going to have the website and the sign up details in the show notes at the bottom. And in the meantime, Kristy, where can people get a hold of you?
Well, the best place is my website. It's
Okay,
just my name, KristyH.com. And I'm also on Instagram. That's the one social media I do with the public. And you can find me at Coddiwomple now there.
I love that. Okay, Kristy, thank you so much for coming on the show and being a good friend as well. I appreciate it. And we will talk with you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was fun. It really was